Friends, welcome to today's video. So today we are going to discuss about environments, that how we can have multiple environments in your app. Now in any real-time project, I'm not talking about your individual projects, but if you work for any corporate, in any project you will have multiple environments like development, QA, UAT, staging, productions, and many more based on that how they want to or how many environment they want to set up. Okay, so our code should not be made in such a way that if let's say that someone asks you that hey Nilesh, give me a build for dev, so you are changing something in the code, you are deleting some URL, you are pointing to new URL. That should not happen. Like it should be just a change of target or something, and then the build should be released for that particular environment. Okay, so let's say that in this video I take three common environment, that is one is your dev and QA and a prod. Okay, so to have multiple environment, the first thing what you have to do, if you see here, if I go to general here in the info, so you have two configurations which is by default created when you create a project. One is your debug and one is your release. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to copy this environment and create three for us, basically like one will be your debug, one will be your QA, and one will be your production. Okay, so here let's first copy this, so plus, and then you have to copy this one, and let's call this as debug QA. Okay, and let me copy one more time and let me call it as debug prod. Okay, and we can also change this one to debug dev. Okay, so now I have three environments: dev, prod, and QA. And the same thing I'll do for the release as well. So duplicate release. So first will be release, let's say QA, and then you have again duplicate, you have release prod, and I'll change this to release dev. Okay, so now total, if you see, I have three configuration for debug and three for release, right? Dev, prod, and QA. So you can set up as many as you want. Okay, now right now if you see, we have just one target. Okay, edit schema, and then here you can see that they have predefined configuration for different thing. Like for running it will be using debug, for profile it will be using release, for archive also it will be release, right? And the similar way we have to do for our three targets that we are going to create, that is the dev, QA, and prod. Okay, so there's a lot of way. One way is that you can click on new schema. Okay, and target will be same, and let's call this as QA. Okay, now we have created this QA, so let's edit this, and the release will be release QA. Go to analyze, this will be debug QA, profiling will be again release QA, test will be debug QA, run will be debug QA, and here there is nothing, so this is done. Okay, so similar way I'll create it for prod also. Go and click on manage schema, and then I can delete this one, right? So now if you see, I have three schema in my project, that is dev, prod, and QA. Okay, now if you have three schema, then obviously you should be also having three different bundle IDs, right? Right now if you see, we have just one bundle ID, but in your actual scenario what will happen, that each target, let's say that at the same point of time you want to have QA, dev, and prod all the build in your phone. So if you keep the same bundle IDs, and so what will happen, that if you have dev and then you want to have QA, it will override your dev build, right? So for better practice, it's always good to have different bundle IDs for your different targets, so that I can have at same point of time I can have different kind of builds in my phone. Okay. So for that, what we need to do is basically that we can go to targets, build setting, and here we should search for bundle ID. Yeah, here. Okay. Now, if you see, we have seen here different schema, different configuration that we have actually just created. Okay. And if you see, by default, all, because we copied actually, and by default bundle ID was this com.test, this Bhagavad Gita, so that the same got copied everywhere. Okay. Now what we need to do, we need to change it, and that all depend on you how you want. So I'll change it to .dev, and then this is pro, and then you have QA, so this will be .qa, and then you have this .dev, then here .prod, and then here .qa. Okay. So now you have your bundle IDs ready for different targets. So if I run it, I can have now 3 different builds at the same point of time. Okay. And now if you come back to general here, it will show that the bundle ID is different. Okay. If you go back here and search for display name, so you can say that you have this display name as well. And what we can do, we can call it as let's say Bhagavad Gita, and then this is Dave, right? We'll call it as Dave. Similarly, this is debug prod, so I'll call it as, I'll just, for prod I'll just call it as Bhagavad Gita. Okay. And for debug QA, I'll call it as QA, and again for the same thing will go for release also. So this is Dave, this is just Bhagavad Gita, and then this is your QA. Okay. Now let's try to run different schema and see how actually it appears in your simulator. Okay. So let me first run my QA, then run for dev and the prod, and I should see 3 different name in my app. Okay. So let it build. So here is a simulator, and if you see here, this is showing something. Let me just shorten the name for you. So I'll just call it as Gita Day, and this also as Gita, and this also as Gita. Okay, so this time we can see properly what's the name actually it's showing in the simulator. So I'm running QA, so you can see it's telling Gita QA. Okay. And now if I run this prod, it will just show me Gita, because prod name is Gita. So there's no link between this name and this name, display name. Many times we confuse, so you can have any name whatever you want. Okay. And see, now this is showing Gita, and the same way if I run dev, it will show dev. Okay. Now that's one way that how we can use this configuration to have different schemas and then different name. You can have even different assets that we'll see in the later video. But how we can maintain different URL, that's the main topic for this video. So for that, what we have to do is that we have to create different schema. Okay. So let me create a new folder here, basically called configuration. Okay. And then new file, and here search for settings. You will get some configuration settings file. So click on this, next, and you can call any name. So I'll call it as similar to what my target is. So BHA with Gita dev. Okay. And add it to the target, create, then new file, and then the new file again. Okay, so now I have three different schema that is defined for basically for three different target. Okay, now is that how will my configuration know about this particular things? Okay, so what you need to do is that go to your general here again in projects. So what you have to do, you have to click on this target and here just select what configuration you want. So this is debug dev, I want dev. Similarly this is prod, so I want here prod. This is QA, so I want here QA. This is again dev, so dev. This is prod, and this is again for QA. Okay, so now each of my configuration is linked with the schema that we created. Okay, so now my configuration know about the schema. Now how to take some variable here? Let's say that if I want to define some base URL, that's the most common scenario, right? So let's say that if I have something like base URL here. Okay, now I'll just copy and paste some dummy URL here. So this is the API that we are going to use. This is the rapid API. I'll show you in the later video. And this is actually just for demo purpose. Basically the URL is up to here only. One more thing here you should keep in mind, if you are defining a string, you don't need to put a double quote. I don't know why Apple specifically does that, but you don't need to write that. Okay, if you write it, it will give some sort of error. And here let's go to QA, make it as QA. Let's go to prod and this make it as prod. So this I'm just going to differentiate that if I run different target and if I try to print this URL, I should get different values, right? And now the same thing you have to add in your info.playlist. Now if in the new projects by default the info playlists are not there, so you have to go here info and then you click on this plus here, add this property, and you don't need to give any value. The value will be taken care based on the target that you are running. Okay, so now I defined it. Okay, base URL. I think my spelling is wrong, so let me put right spelling. Okay, and same thing will go to here. This is base URL and this is also base URL. Okay, so okay, so now this is done. So next thing what I'm going to do is that create a file which will actually read this. So let me create a sort file and call it as configuration manager. Okay, so now let me just copy and paste few piece of code here. So here what is basically happening, that you have this enum API and then this is a static object. Okay, now this means that you can access this without creating any instance or something. API.base URL, we can access it, and once you call this, what it basically try to do, it tries to call this build configuration dot value for this base URL. Now what basically this is doing, so if you see this build configuration, this is again an enum, this is private because we are not accessing it from anywhere else. And here you have this basically this function which is important for you. So what it basically does, it reads the same thing for your in your bundle.main.object dictionaries, and then it tries to find the value for the same thing. Okay, so here first it will go to this place, your info.playlist, and for this particular object it will come to the schema and get the values from here. Okay, so that's what is happening in this particular function. Okay, so yeah, just so that if you want to copy down, you can copy down this particular function. Okay, and then we are calling this. Now let's me just print this, that whether it's printing perfectly or not. So can be one of the place. So here print and then API dot base URL. Okay, now if I run this, so right now see you are in the prod, so we are expecting this particular in the line in the print statement, right? So if you run for dev, then it should print for dev. So let me see the print, and you can see that here this is printing prod. Okay, now let me change the target to dev, and this time it should give me the dev. Okay, so this way is easy, that you can define different schema and then run, and you see that you don't need to change anything. You don't need to change any line of code to actually run in different target. You just need to select your target. Okay, and you can see that the value is printing dev. Okay, now now the next part is that what if you want to have like for example differentiate in different target. Let's say that I want to use in some piece of code logic based on dev, QA and prod. Now how can we do that? Okay, so for that what you have to do, let me just write few piece of code here firstly. So my file name is configuration manager, so I can do it like I can define enum configuration manager, and inside that I can have another enum called environment. Okay, now this environment can have cases based on how many targets you have. I have 3, that is dev, then QA and then prod. Okay, so that means environment can have either of these 3 values. Okay, now we can define an object here, static var environment, and this is going to return me environment. Okay, now how can I know that whether I have to return dev, QA or prod? Okay, so for that you need to do one more extra thing, that is to define this thing in your active compilation flag. Okay, so what we need to do basically is that go here, then go to your target, and here search for, go to your build settings, search for active, and then there will be compile, yeah, this one, active compilation condition. Now if you see we copied for debug, so by default the debug is copied everywhere. So here this is dev, so what I'll basically do is that I'll add one more thing, that is dev. Okay, similarly this is prod, so I'll add it as a prod. This is QA, so I'll add it as QA. Similarly this is release dev, so I'll add here as dev again, and this one is prod, so add prod and then QA. Okay, so now this is done. So now what we can do, we can go back to our configuration manager, and now we can access this in our code. So what we can do, we can write it like hash if dev. Okay, if it is dev, then what you have to do, return dot dev. Yeah, right. Similarly, let me just copy this, and here the next condition will be else if, right? Else if it is QA, then return QA. Then you have one more else if condition, that if it is prod, right? We have just set 3 values, it can be either of this 3, and then this case we have to return prod. Okay, and then in the last you have to use endif. Okay, so now let me just make it a little clear, and yeah, the error is gone. Now let's say that you want to check this thing in your app, that which environment you are, because what will happen that when you have more and more parameters, I don't prefer extra polluting my schema file. So you can have different, let's say JSON file, and based on the environment you can read the JSON file and make a structures for that. Let's say that a common structure containing all your data, like what kind of base you are using, or any kind of parameter. Okay, so that way you can also do using this environment thing. So for the time being, let me just print this in the view model again here. So print configuration manager dot environment. Okay, so right now I'm running dev, so it should print me dev, right? So let's see what it prints. So you can see that the print is dev. Now let me change it and run it to prod. Okay, so now this time it should print prod. Okay, that way how you can differentiate based on your environment anywhere if you want a specific logics to be written for a specific environment. Okay, so that's all for today's video. Hope you have enjoyed it watching this, and if you really enjoyed, then please do subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching. Thank you.